to south, east, west, in terms of the African continent as a whole. We are young, we are vibrant, and we're always talking about how there can never be conversations about us without us. And then just to touch on a few of our programs that we run long term, we do have the Amazon Annual Leadership Forum for Young Female Leaders, which is commonly known as the TheALI. It is an annual event that we have towards the end of the year where we have a lot of different speakers and mentors and guests come in to really give us, different sessions and lectures about socioeconomic standards and conversations that exist within our society so that we can equip with the knowledge to go out there and have conversations about gender and have conversations about the socioeconomic status, right? It's one of our highlight programs and we always advocate for it each and every year. And then one of our big programs that we have as well is the mentorship program, as well as the back to school program and the menstrual health and hygiene management program. And lastly, but definitely not least, we have the internship and job shadowing program, right? I do not have enough time to go into all of these programs one by one, but these are just giving you an idea in terms of the work that we do within the South African context, within the African context, and also in terms of the global scale. And lastly, but definitely not least, we do have the Pan-African Youth Network of Young Female Leaders, which exists across the entire African continent, and we have different regions as well. We have the Southern Africa Caucus, we have the West African Caucus, and we have the Cent, Eastern, Northern, and the Diaspora, where we have young female leaders from around the ages of teenagers as well, going up to 30, where we gather every day and we have conversations about things that exist within our society. And obviously, because different regions have different circumstances and challenges that they're dealing with, there's always different programs and events that address these issues and that aim to really equip young people to be able to know their worth, to know what they are able to say in terms of the power that they have and the difference that they can make if they can just take a stand when it comes to owning their leadership and owning their power. So thank you so much. I think that just sort of covers a lot of the things that the TheALI stands for. But I think what I would want you to take away is really to understand that hashtag Black Child, your dreams are valued. Your dreams are valid. Sorry. Thank you so much. I hope this is going to be an amazing session, and I'm so excited to learn from all the speakers that we have. And I'm going to hand back to our lovely host for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bontle. It's such an honor to be part of such a life-changing community. And, it's filled with such brilliant young minds, young African leaders. So I really hope that you guys listen in today and just enjoy what the speakers will be bringing in today. I don't know if Khomolemo is here, but next up we've got Khomolemo. She's the creative brain behind, so many things that make the TheALI what it is. I think she'll just take a moment to reflect on why this webinar, series exists and how we continue to build a safe, truth-telling spaces like this one. So, Khomolemo, if you're here, please take over. I don't think she's here, but Exilda can take her space. Exilda, if you don't mind.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Just want to thank each and every person that has joined, especially our speakers, for taking time from their busy schedules just to come speak to us and educate us more. So without wasting much time, just to get everyone on the same page. So as the Amazon Leadership Initiative, we started a webinar series called Women and Girls' Rights this year. And our first session was particularly around the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. And this is our second session where we'll be tackling the Maputo Protocol. So basically, as the Amazon Leadership Initiative, realized that there are so many tools and legal frameworks that have been put in place to protect young women and girls. But then we continue to see high rates of gender-based violence within our communities. There's so much discrimination. There's limited access to justice too. So as TheALI, we decided to start this webinar series where we educate young women and girls on some of these instruments that are available to protect them. Because many of the times when you go through some of the documents that have been put online, some of our pages from our various ministries of gender within our countries, you find that there are different frameworks that are there, and our countries continue to ratify these instruments and legal frameworks, but then you find that they continue to remain unimplemented. And when you go into the communities, you find that majority of the young people are unaware of these instruments. So as TheALI, we've taken up this initiative just to raise awareness on some of these instruments. And these sessions are there to help young women and girls be aware of how they can use these tools to protect themselves. We're here so that these people can use these tools as remedies and protection, especially from survivors of gender-based violence. And this session is also there just to encourage young women and girls to advocate and also champion within their local communities. Because as the Amazon Leadership Initiative, this is a Pan-African network. So we have different girls from various countries, and there's different ways in which we can advocate for these instruments. So this session is just there to empower each and every girl, because we believe advocacy shouldn't really start at the top, but it starts at the bottom, where each and every person, each and every young person takes a step to educate others. It might be through your statuses, it might be through sharing within your communities. So these shared sessions are just there to educate and just help young people advocate. And basically, we are also just promoting gender equality among us young women and girls. And we hope through these sessions we're able to mobilize funds and also find ways in which we can reach out and get to more people into the communities. So we have about 4 sessions planned for this year. This is our second one. If there are any people that missed out any session, you can check our YouTube channel. You'll be able to find the first session. If you have queries, there's something that you need to find out more, you can always reach out. We can reach out to the previous speakers, and the speaking during the session are able to also guide you and just educate you more on some of these things. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to our host.
Thank you so much, Axelda, for explaining that in depth. Okay, so now it's time for the meat, right? When we talk about the Maputo Protocol, we're talking about Africa's own blueprint, for women's rights. It's one of the most progressive instruments out there, but so many countries are still playing catch up. And this is where Dr. Justina Obaye Ajala comes in. I love unconventional Black women, by the way. You know, she's a legal powerhouse, a UN fellow, and the first African woman to win a case in Chinese courts. but beyond the titles, she's someone who understands why the Maputo Protocol matters and why it takes to, make it real. Dr. Justina, thank you for being here. It's an honor to share this time and space with you. Please, please bless us with the truth.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you for joining today's webinar. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of my sisters. I can see them in the chat comments. Evelyn, Aderunke, Biola. Thank you for joining and everyone here today. And first of all, I would like to appreciate TheALI for the invitation to speak in this series of webinar that has been organized to create awareness and advocacy on women's and girls' rights. Thank you for the opportunity to project and carry on the advocacy work I've been doing around the Maputo Protocol, a declaration that is so dear to my heart, to share on how we can use the Maputo for the promotion and protection of African women's rights, moving from policy to reality. So I titled this presentation today, Empowering Change, Advancing Women's Rights Through the Maputo Protocol. And so please, you can move the slide. Can I be heard, please? I think the slide is not moving. Yes, you can move to the next slide, please. Or is it just from my end? I can see the PPT, but it's not moving. I think you can just put it on slideshow so it can, yes. Yes, thank you. So I would like to start with the opening reflection. A right not known is a right not claimed. This reminds us that awareness is power. If we don't know that a right exists, then we don't even have a reason to claim it. Until every woman knows that she has the right to dignity, equality, education, safety, and health. And health include sexual and reproductive health. Then true liberation remains unfinished. The powerful truth lies at the heart of the Maputo Protocol, a groundbreaking instrument that defends dignity, freedom, and protection of African women and girls. Yet many girls and women still don't know that they have the right to say no to early marriage. So many women still don't know that they have the right to control their reproductive health. They have the right to inheritance, to land, or to even live freely from violence and harmful practices. Maybe I should ask here, how many of us in this meeting today know that this right exists? You can show your hands virtually if you can. And okay, let me paint a scenario. Imagine a girl in a rural village who has been told right from birth that her destiny is early marriage and childbearing. Maybe she has never been to school, never heard of the word consent, and have never been told that her voice matters. But through community awareness campaign based on Maputo Protocol, such as the one we are having now, she learns for the first time that she has the right to education, to safety, and to her own choices. That knowledge is revolutionary. It transforms her fear into confidence and silence into action. Perhaps there are women and girls on this platform today that does not know that this right exists. Congratulations, you are not alone, and you are here to learn. And I believe that this knowledge you gain today will transform you and make a difference in your life. And I want you to also imagine a woman who has lost her husband, or who was told that she has no right to inheritance, to husband property, land, which is very common in Africa. At least I can say for Nigeria, where I come from. And then with the knowledge of the Maputo Protocol, she challenges the tradition, stands before a local court, and claims her legal rights. Her victory is not just as alone, but because she wins this case, it also brings light to others. It makes others to know that these rights really exist. So your learning today is not just to enlighten you or to liberate you alone, but to also light the path for other women and girls that are going through one difficulty or the other, that are going through domestic violence, different forms of discrimination. And also across Africa, when women and girls discover their rights under the Maputo Protocol, we've seen that they become leaders, educators, activists, and change makers. They break the circle of oppression and replace them with legacy of empowerment. So please remember this, that a right not known is a life I've lived. A right claim is a life fully empowered. So we must teach it, share it, advocate, and amplify this right, because knowledge is not only power, it is freedom. The next slide, please. And I know that maybe someone is wondering, what is Maputo Protocol? You've been hearing about the Maputo Protocol. So I'll just briefly introduce what the Maputo Protocol is about. So in 2003, the African Union adopted the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the People of African, on the rights of women in Africa, which is also referred to as the Maputo Protocol. So the protocol is in response to the implementation of the African Charter and other international instruments established to address issues of women. The Maputo Protocol is a progressive legal framework for African women, which addresses issues often neglected in global instruments, issues such as child marriage, gender-based violence, reproductive health, economic independence, and the right to peace. It has both provisions that reflect African reality and aspiration. So the Maputo Protocol addresses issues that pertains to African women and girls. The next slide, please. And so let's look at the Maputo Protocol. I know some of us may know about CEDAW and probably are hearing about the Maputo Protocol for the first time. So I would like to just talk about the Maputo Protocol in relation to CEDAW, that's Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women under the UN. So the Maputo Protocol upholds dignity, freedom, equality, and justice for women, not like its counterpart CEDAW does not have the same principle, but the difference is that the Maputo Protocol centers on African women's reality and experiences. The Maputo Protocol on the right of African women was formulated due to the lack of implementation of the African Charter and other international instruments such as CEDAW, but does not mean that CEDAW does not address African women's rights. It's just that the Maputo Protocol was established solely to address issues of African women. And the Maputo Protocol also recognizes intersectionality and diverse vulnerability, but does not say but yes, but also CEDAW also address a lot of issues. But the Maputo Protocol is a legally binding multilateral supplement of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It is very comprehensive with robust normative standard targeted at every area of African women. However, despite its optimism that it carries to ensure the protection of women and African women, in reality, the implementation of these rights are quite slow, which is a major challenge, and I'll talk about that later on during this presentation. The next slide, please. So do you know what the Maputo Protocol says about women's rights? I want this to be a bit interactive. If you know any right in the Maputo Protocol, please kindly drop in the comment section any right at all that you know about the Maputo Protocol. Please, you can drop it in the comment section. The next slide, please. Do you know what the map? Yes. So I would like to see the comment section if you know of any rights that is enshrined in the Maputo Protocol. Anyone? But I won't be surprised Yes, it opposes dignity. Yes, I'll thank you. But I won't be surprised if we don't have people that knows about the rights in the Maputo Protocol, because even within the human rights space, many lawyers and activists don't know that this right exists. So you are not alone, and that's why we are having this webinar today. So I will briefly talk about the core rights. There are about 32 articles in the Maputo Protocol, but I'll talk about the core rights because I can talk about each of them now. So, and each of these rights are relevant and addresses women and African girls' situation. Every girl and women in Africa deserve to grow up in a world where our rights are known, protected, and enforced. But rights means nothing if people don't know that they exist. So we have to know these rights. And African women deserve freedom from fear, not just freedom on paper. It's not about just writing it on a document, but we have to get freedom, the true freedom. And this article does not just protect violence, they protect a world where women are valued, respected, and safe. So the core protocol in the core rights in this protocol includes the next slide, please. One, end discrimination, which can be seen in Article 2. Governments must outlaw all forms of discrimination against women. Every woman deserves fair treatment at home, work, school, in public places with no exceptions. And you have a role to play by speaking up if you see discrimination, demand policy that promotes and protects gender equality. And we also to stop violence against women, that is Article 3 and 4, which says that every woman and girl has the right to live freely from physical, sexual, psychological, and economic abuse. States must prevent and punish all forms of violence. And what you can do is to break the silence, support survivors, and help perpetrators accountable. And three, ban the article also ban practices, harmful practices such as female genital mutilation, forced marriages, other harmful traditions. The law must protect every girl's health and dignity. So you as an individual, you can raise awareness, stand with communities working to end these harmful practices, which is very common in Africa. And the next slide, please. And four, marriage and family rights. Article 6 and 7 provides for this, that every woman has the right to choose a partner, enter marriage with free and full consent, and be treated equally with your partner. And child marriage is strictly illegal, and the legal age for marriage is 18 and above, not 18 and below. And what you can do is advocate for legal, as an advocate, as an activist. We can advocate for legal marriage registration, support education campaign about women's families' rights. And also the another core right is equal access to justice, which is in Article 8. Every woman deserves fair treatment by law. So legal aid, access to court, and gender-sensitive law enforcement are not negotiable. So your action may include helping women navigate legal system, push for local legal aid clinic. And also we have the right to political participation, which is Article 9. Women must participate equally in election, hold offices, influence decision at all levels, be it local, national, or regional level without limitation. So let us encourage women to vote, to be voted for, and to also vote, and mentor future leaders and support gender quotas as well in places of authorities. And the next slide, please. We have the reproductive health and rights. That is seen in Article 14. Every woman can decide if and when and how many children to have. You have the right to your body. Safe abortion is a right under this specific circumstances like rape or risks to health, and this article provides for this. And so let's promote access to health, education, and reproductive services. And then we have the right to education and training, and which is in Article 12. Every girl and women deserve a quality education free of harassment and stereotype, and schools must be safe and welcoming, and we should encourage girls to stay in school, speak up against harassment or discrimination against any girl child. And then the ninth one is economic empowerment. That's Article 13, equal pay, safe working condition, maternity leave, and an end to sexual harassment at work must become the norm. So we should support women in entrepreneurship. There are a lot of women doing businesses. Let's encourage them, let's patronize them, encourage and support them, advocate for policies to ensure that women have access to finance, training, and employment. And we should always advocate and support them. And then the next slide, please. Yeah, so rights to housing, food, and environments. This is reflected in Article 15, 16, and 18. Every woman deserves nutritious food, clean water, decent housing, and a healthy environment to thrive. So we should support initiative for food security, shelter for vulnerable women, and community environmental protection. And also we have protection in conflicts, which is Article 10 and 11. Women and girls must be protected during war, conflict, and displacement. Sexual violence is a war crime and it must be punished. So anyone that engage in any sexual violence during wartime must be punished. And so let's support organization working with refugee women and girls, displaced women, push for women's inclusion in peacemaking process. And lastly, the special protection, which is Article 22 to 24. Vulnerable women such as elderly women, women with disabilities, single mothers, women in poverty deserve extra care and support. So we need to advocate for social safety and community programs that uplift these women. So every article in the Maputo Protocol is a reminder that women deserve dignity, equality, safety, and opportunity. So let's work together to spread the word, demand action, and make sure that every woman and girl knows our rights, because it's very important that we know our rights. So the next slide, please. And so we've been talking about the Maputo Protocol. What sets the Maputo Protocol apart? And the protocol has explicit protection of sexual and reproductive rights. It boldly tackles practices that strip women and girls of their dignity and health. The Maputo Protocol recognizes harmful tradition practices such as the female genital mutilation, child marriage, forced rituals, and degrading ceremonies, and is committed to transformative change in law and culture. There are indeed a lot of treaties with similar aims, but what makes the Maputo Protocol unique is that it centers on African reality. It centers on African women's situation, and so that's what makes it different. That's what makes from other treaties. The next slide. Okay, progress made. As of today, 2025, there are 45 out of 55 African countries that have signed or ratified the protocol, which is a great progress. 11 countries are yet to ratify the protocol. For example, Eritrea and Sudan have signed but not ratified. And remember that ratification is not enough. Without national implementation and public awareness, the protocol remains a beautiful idea on paper. However, the fact that almost all the member states have signed is a great progress. At least we can give that to the African Union. And another achievement is the strong legal protection in the area of female FMG, child marriage, and reproductive rights, as I earlier mentioned. The growing youth and civil society engagement is also a progress, as there is a growing engagement with the protocol, such as this webinar we are having is a testament to that. The next slide. So despite the progress made, the next slide, please. Okay, let me just continue. It's not moving. Okay, so despite the progress made, there are many challenges that needs to be addressed in order for the protocol to be very effective. And one of the major challenges to this protocol is low or lack of awareness and civic education. Imagine a protocol that has been adopted for more than 20 years. Still, many people don't know that it exists, let alone the right enshrined in it. Even within the human rights space, like I mentioned, people don't know this powerful legal instrument exists. Honestly, I didn't know about the Maputo Protocol until 2022, and I've been in the human rights space long before then, but didn't know that it existed until I took an advanced course on women's rights in Africa, and that was how I got to know about it. And that this alone speaks volume about how poor the awareness and implementation has been. Imagine a document adopted over 20 years ago by the African Union, designed to protect the rights of African women, and even human rights lawyers and activists don't know it exists. That says a lot, and that's exactly why I have committed myself to this task, to raise awareness, push for implementation, and ensure that it does not remain just another forgotten document. Change is slow, yes, but it starts with conversation like this. So I'm very happy we are having this conversation today, which is a step in the right direction on raising awareness on the protocol. So we should not let another 20 years to pass without acting on our collective promise to protect the rights of African women and girls. So another major issue is the lack of political will to enforce human rights firmly on national agendas of member states. The African Charter and the Africa Commission have not made significant progress in the promotion and protection of women's rights in Africa and curbing human rights violation. More so, the AU member states are always willing to create human rights institutions, but are not willing to comply to its provisions or take appropriate measure when rights are violated. And we are very good as the African member states are very good in signing and committing on papers. We have signed nearly every major human rights instrument. However, without mechanism, resources, and political will to enforce this right, it remains a symbol. It's just symbolic. It's not about writing and signing and committing to all these papers, all this right, but the enforcement is more important. And this morning I stumbled on a post by Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa on LinkedIn, where the organization criticized the new convention on the elimination of violence against women and children. I'm sure maybe some of us might be aware of that, which has a lot of implementation gap. It's really encouraging to see that civil society, individuals, and activists are stepping up and speaking out on issues that deeply affect the protection of women's rights. And this is exactly the kind of critical engagement needed where there are gaps, either legislative or implementation gap. We must question the purpose. Our role now is to keep raising awareness, mobilizing voices, and consistently lobbying member states. We have to lobby our countries, our governments, to move from symbolic ratification. It's not just about ratification, but to real implementation. Every effort, every voice truly counts. So you as a person, as an organization, you also have a role to play as well. And so we also have the adoption of the Maputo Protocol on the right of African women is a great progress by the AU members to address the issue of violation against African women. However, many member states are still having issues to embrace the provisions of rights enshrined in the protocol, which is perceived as a modern rights, contrary to the African culture and values. A lump sum of human rights violations are under the disguise of African values, and cultural system has been considered harmful as well as criticized for violating the rights of women and children. These harmful practices such as the FGM, early marriage, human trafficking are still prevalent in many parts of Africa, which is deeply rooted in custom and traditional practices and cannot be simply legislated away. So ending and eradicating such practices required a strong political will from our governments and commitment by them to, and also dialogue within communities and traditional leaders can make a change. And another major challenge in the realization of the Maputo Protocol is the conflict between customary and religious norms in Africa. This challenge often happens where there is a conflict between harmful practices that are excused in the name of tradition and religion and its impact on women's rights. And also, the government of many states are still not convinced that the idea of modern, like they say, modern women's rights as enshrined in the Maputo Protocol should supersede tradition and custom. While our culture can indeed be our hope when it comes to women, bodily autonomy, dignity, safety, we must be willing to question those aspects that act as a yoke rather than a source of strength. The Maputo Protocol may challenge some norms, but it also opens doors for constructive reform that centers both rights and identity. And lastly, the failure of state parties to fulfill their reporting obligation by the provisions of Article 62 of the African Charter and Article 26, Sub 1 of the African Women's Protocol. Apart from the implementation of the right, states are also obligated to ensure that they report every 2 years to indicate steps they taking to ensure that the rights of women are domesticated in their laws. However, the challenge of this protocol is the lack of effective monitoring mechanism. This is evidence in state parties not reporting at all or giving late submission of reports. So these are some of the challenges that we have in the implementation of the protocol and which need urgent attention. The next slide, please. Yes, so special focus, women, young women and girls. Yes, so you and I are agents of change, including men. It's not just women and girls. Everyone has a role to play. Young women and girls are not just beneficiaries of this rights, but they are the true agents of change who will change Africa's future. We have a lot of African women who are doing great exploits today as advocates, educators, innovators, and trailblazers, whether they are using the social media to speak up about gender equality, leading grassroots campaigns to end harmful practices, or stepping into leadership roles in their schools, community, and parliament. They are really redefining leadership. The power of social media cannot be emphasized as digital tools, and youth movements are fueling this progress as well, from TikTok to Twitter, from youth networks to local initiative. Our young women are making sure that this right go beyond paper and that this right comes to reality. So it's high time we join this movement and use the Maputo Protocol as a shield to make change, to take up the fight for justice with knowledge and confidence. After hearing this, I'm sure you know that the Maputo Protocol is very effective. It encompasses everything. So let's use the knowledge and to fight for justice. The protocol is not just mere words, but powerful legal framework that can be used. So let's use it, let's share it, and make a change with it. The next slide, please. The next slide. Okay, thank you. From power to policy to power. I really love the theme of this webinar, beyond words, from policy to reality. Enough of the underusage of the Maputo Protocol. It's high time we use it. Imagine this instrument that has been adopted for over 20 years and it has not been used. It's just more of policy, because it's just very few people that use the instrument. But let's be honest, a protocol is only as strong as the action is inspired. The time for mere words is over. So it's time for reaction, and the time is now. And knowledge is the first thing, is the first step. We have to use our voices. The Maputo Protocol can't protect what people don't know exists. If people don't know their rights exist, then it cannot address anything. So we have to educate ourselves first, educate others around us about this right and the right the protocols guarantee. So we have to speak up, speak out, and never let this right be silenced or forgotten. Let's use our voices. Our voice amplifies the rights in this protocol to defend the rights of African women and girls, and also demand implementation and accountability. 20 years is long enough to wait. We must move beyond promises. Governments must do more than just signing treaties. We have to hold them accountable. We have to hold them to their commitments, call for action, and insist that they put these protections into practice. We have to demand for laws, policies, and budgets that make the protocol real in every African woman. And support grassroots and youth led initiative. Real change grows from ground up. We have to stand with youth movements, women groups such as TheALI, and other community championing the Maputo Protocol, who are turning the Maputo Protocol from mere paper into progress. We have to move from policy to power. It's not just about it being on paper. So together we can turn this powerful instrument into real progress for every woman, for every girl child, for every community across Africa. Let's move beyond mere words. Let's take action with the Maputo Protocol. The protocol is more than a document. It's a declaration that women's rights are non-negotiable. It is a roadmap to justice, dignity, and equality. It needs you and I to bring it to life. So let's make good use of the Maputo Protocol to defend the rights of African women. The next slide. What can you do? What can we do as an individual, as a community group, as a group? We need to learn and share the Maputo Protocol like we are doing now. This is a right step. We are learning about it. So it's not just about learning. We have to share it. Engage leaders and lawmakers about the implementation of these protocols and to be domesticated in national laws of your country. And then we need to start local campaigns and peer dialogue conversation on this rights. And you can also join existing networks such as TheALI that are into the fight for justice for girls and women. The next slide, please. Yes, so call to action. This protocol is yours. Let's protect it, enforce it, and live it. We are the generation to close the gap between paper and practice. The protocol has been here long ago, and we have to use it. and we have to transform it from just mere words into actions that will make a difference in the life of African women and girl child. And so I would like to close with these words. Next slide. When you empower a woman, you empower a nation. The next slide, please. Yes. So this is my closing words. When you empower a woman, you empower a nation. Let us build an African women, an Africa where women's rights are not optional but guaranteed. So the Maputo Protocol is not just a treaty, it's a blueprint for dignity, protection, and power. And it's time we give it the spotlight it deserves. The question is no longer why haven't we heard about it? Is now now that we know, what are we going to do about it? Now that you've learned about the Maputo Protocol, what do you want to do about it? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. I think I have two questions before we continue. I don't know if anyone has a question, but thank you so much. So during your professional work, have you used the Maputo Protocol, during a law case in court?
Okay. Yes. So like I mentioned that the first time I got to know about the Maputo Protocol was 2022. That was after COVID. And at the time I was not
Yes.
on the continent. I was not in Africa. So I've not used it personally.
Yeah.
But in my research
Yeah.
work, I've used the Maputo Protocol. In fact, my PhD dissertation was on the Maputo Protocol. It was after I learned about the Maputo Protocol, I was really motivated that an instrument that is so powerful as this is being neglected. So I had to take it up, and then my dissertation was on that. So ever since then, I've been trying to do advocacy around that, but I've not really used it in the courts before. And it's so funny that I'm presently in the UK. We have Nigerian lawyers in the UK, and then on the platform I posted something on Maputo Protocol, and it's so interesting that even lawyers don't know about it. Imagine lawyers that advocate for people, activists don't know that this powerful instrument exists. So even me, I've not really used it per se, but I've done a lot of research on it. Of course, if I have the opportunity to use the Maputo Protocol, I will definitely do that. And apart from being a lawyer, even as individuals here in this platform now, you don't necessarily have to be a lawyer before you can use the Maputo Protocol. You can use it in different ways. Like I mentioned, there are many things you can do. You can join existing organizations that are into the fight for justice for women. There are lots of girls, women who are victims of domestic violence. These are the ways you can step in to advocate for them, to rally around them, because some of them, they need support. So the Maputo Protocol, it encompasses a lot. It addresses everything that has to do with African women and girls. So there are a lot of ways that you can use it. It does not necessarily have to be used in courts. And so it's not just for lawyers, it's for everyone, both men and women, the young and old. Everybody has access to the Maputo Protocol and should be used by everyone. Thank you. I hope I answered the question.
So how can these instruments be? Yes, you did. Thank you so much for that. So how can these instruments be implemented into the school curriculum?
Yes, so one of the things we can do as an organization, I'm happy that TheALI is into women right for girls and women. So we can advocate and lobby our governments. I'm sure all of us we are from different countries, and so our governments are member states of the African Union. So we have to lobby our governments to make sure that they enforce and implement the protocol. They've all signed most of the countries, like I mentioned, about 45 countries already have ratified or signed the protocol. So it's also our responsibility to lobby our government to enforce the rights of this protocol, because they've signed to it. So they have the obligation to enforce it, and we also have the responsibility to follow up and make sure that they enforce it into school curriculum, into the media is rarely talked about. Most media don't talk about it. We can also put it in the media, even as individual. Thank God for technology now. We all have access to media, to all these social media platform. We can also use it, like myself, for example. Now I took it upon myself to start using the social media, especially LinkedIn, to start projecting and advocating for the Maputo Protocol. So as an individual, you can as well.
Thank you so much, Doc. I think, you know what, I think so many of us didn't even know, we had these rights. And, imagine what that says about, the systems around us and what's being kept from us. Guys, this is our lives. These are our choices, our freedom. And I think what hit most is, how powerful knowledge actually is. Like she said, a right known is a half, a life half lived. And I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to live halfway. So thank you so much, Doc. So now that we've heard the legal framework, I think it's time to bring it to the ground. So Yande Banda is not just an activist. I would love to believe that she's a force. She has sat in, UN rooms, where most of us, only dream about. And she's made sure that the voices of African girls are heard very loud and clear. She's a philanthropist, convener, and someone, who understands how power moves. So, and how to redirect it back to the people. Yande, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time. Over to you, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Christina, as well, for your presentation on the Maputo Protocol. I'll ask that my slides are shared, please. Thank you, Exilda. My name is Yande Banda. I've been in advocacy for the past 8 years. I started my advocacy when I was 12 years old. I first encountered the Maputo Protocol when I was working for the Children's News Agency, and my work in the Children's News Agency encompassed media training and its intersection to children's rights. And so essentially, when I heard about the Maputo Protocol, I heard of it in correlation to the rights in education and the rights that women, and particularly younger women, could claim within the right to education. When I heard about the protocol, I'm not going to lie to you, at first I was like, it's a protocol that was signed in Maputo, and I thought it was a protocol that was only for Maputo itself. But I quickly realized that this was a protocol that was signed and ratified by over 44 countries, and Sudan actually was the last country to ratify it in 2023. However, it was very rarely operationalized within different constituencies. And that was a big problem. But for today, my presentation is going to cover not just how the Maputo Protocol affects young people of Africa in this day and age, but how you can be a part of the process of implementing the Maputo Protocol and ensuring that your governments are held accountable for its operationalization. So we have a beautiful slide. Let's move on to the next one, please, Exilda. Thank you. Now, I'm going to start with what the progress is in terms of the Maputo Protocol, because I believe in starting on positive notes. Now, as Dr. Justina rightfully said, the Maputo Protocol is one of the most comprehensive legal frameworks that we have. It's all-encompassing, and it generally covers the political, economic, social, and cultural rights of women in particular, but it also does have a segment on girls, on adolescent girls, which is particularly important for our advocacy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the anti-violence, my apologies, framework that was recently signed and why it's important and how it ties into the Maputo Protocol. But it being a comprehensive legal framework from the time that it was signed was a great win for women's human rights, because Africa didn't necessarily have a legal framework that not only lawyers and scholars and activists could point at in terms of precedent, but it was a framework that everybody could agree on in terms of the rights of women and the rights of African women in particular. Its legislative reforms were also particularly transformative, especially when we look at the criminalization of harmful practices like female genital mutilation and gender-based violence, but it also had a specific section on increased access to healthcare. This was in particularly dealing with sexual reproductive health and rights, improvements of healthcare infrastructure, reducing maternal deaths, as well as better access to family planning services in particular regions. Now, there's a big emphasis here on the state of African women's rights at the time that the Maputo Protocol is signed and as it is ratified. Female genital mutilation was a particular issue that many African countries face, and it wasn't an issue that was faced globally. So a lot of UN charters, for example, and African Union charters were not very specific to the rights of women in Africa. And so this particular framework, this particular protocol was particularly important in not only recognizing that female genital mutilation was occurring at a very concerning rate in Africa, but it also forced member states to get to the table and say, these are the solutions and this is how we're going to implement them. And it also forced them to finance them. Within advocacy, we always say, if it's not written down, member states will not finance it. If it's not a clause, member states will not take it seriously. And so by having a comprehensive document, this Maputo Protocol essentially brought it into the hands of financiers and the hands of, I always say, ministries of finance, and said, this is a big issue. Women are saying it's a big issue. We need to fund the solutions against it. Next slide, please. This is slide 5. Yes. Slide 3. There we go. Protection from harmful practices. Again, it was also instrumental in terms of advocating against child marriage and female genital mutilation. And countries like Ethiopia outlawed these practices and implemented national strategies to combat them. Child marriage was a very serious issue in Africa. And I always tell people that the statistics are very alarming still, especially in the southern parts of Africa, but it was much worse than this, especially when we look at the harmonization of laws between the age of consent. And this is something which a lot of African countries have battled with, especially in the legal system. I also happen to be a lawyer, and one of the things that we have been advocating for is this harmonization of age between the customary law and between constitutional law. So essentially what we're saying is one part of the law can't say a child is 16 years old and a child can get married at 16 as long as there's consent of the parents, and then the other part of the law is saying 18. There needs to be a harmonization of laws, and there also needs to be a strategy that's implemented by ministries to ensure that this harmonization can take place. So what do I mean here? I mean, birth certificates need to be funded, for example, because if parents cannot prove that their children are a particular age because there's no funding within public hospitals to produce birth certificates, then there's no point in us having a protocol and an operationalization of this protocol through the legal systems of a country. And so one of the reasons why the Maputo Protocol was so important was not only did it recognize that the issue of child marriage was pervasive within African countries. It also recognized that there needed to be a particular focus on the strategies to ending child marriage. And this is why the African Union was very head-on in terms of appointing ambassadors against child marriage. And I know my president in Zambia is one of the ambassadors, but this was why it was so important that the Maputo Protocol was operationalized within countries, because it put out that there was a big issue in Africa in terms of children's rights and women's rights and girls' rights in particular in terms of child marriage and ending FGM. Now, women's political participation, while there is a lot of room for improvement, many women politicians in Africa, and we're at a very tough time within the world, but also a very tough time politically within Africa, within funding and within the engagement of women and girls in all their diversity in political spaces. But essentially what this protocol was supposed to do was it was supposed to create these quotas where women would become key decision makers, and it would allow them to become decision makers. So it just wouldn't create space for them, but essentially it would also provide a space where women can be developed as leaders, participating within constituencies as councillors, participating all the way up until the presidential level, and also creating quotas within political parties. It also established legal precedents. And while these legal precedents are not necessarily binding, they are persuasive, which is still important. And I do agree, as Justina said, not many lawyers and not many academics and not many professionals know about the Maputo Protocol, but it's there. And it's still being cited a lot, especially within the human rights space and the advocacy space. And member states are aware of it, because a lot of the times we jump onto protocols and legal instruments that have the language that we're looking for to further precedent the work that we're doing and financing. So legal precedence was a huge part of the Maputo Protocol. Next slide. Now, what are the gaps? We've talked about the positive things. Uneven implementation and ratification. We consistently say that we have so many perfect documents that are sitting up in terms of how we can actualize human rights. We have so many perfect systemic documents that if we implemented, we would see much better results on the states of women rights in Africa. As of June 2023, not all AU member states have ratified the protocol. As I said, it's 44 out of 55. And even among the ones that have implemented this protocol, it's still inconsistent, which leaves women in certain regions without consistent legal protection. And I do agree that because a lot of officials are actually not very educated on the Maputo Protocol, and they're not very educated on the legal instruments that we have. So even when we get into negotiation rooms where we're discussing, for example, how we're going to move forward with the position of Africa, with the position of your member states on certain human rights issues, a lot of the people who are negotiating actually don't understand how the Maputo Protocol feeds into it. So they recognize, for example, that women have the right to dignity, but they don't understand how to implement that right to dignity, and that the right to dignity intersects, for example, with the right to abortion or the right to sexual reproductive health and rights services. And there's much contention around this issue. So a lack of implementation and ratification leaves perfect protocols, well, not perfect, but leaves good protocols worthless, because if we have the paper, what's the point if we don't have the implementation? There's also been insufficient detail on violence against women in particular, and it's not comprehensive and it's not detailed as it should be. And because of that, violence against women, again, being a very pervasive issue, it has been left behind within the Maputo Protocol. But in addition to other instruments, of course, which I'm going to talk about as this slide presentation continues very quickly because I don't want us to sleep, it's become a bigger issue. And because it's also developing, violence against women is developing as a result of advancements in artificial intelligence and technology, for example. Now we have deep fakes for porn, for example. We have deep fakes which are automated by AI. And so protocols like this need to be also further ratified and reviewed so they can catch up with what's happening in this modern day and age. We also have limited accountability mechanisms. The protocol's mechanisms for ensuring state accountability have dwindled. As we know, it's not a legally binding document. So that means that even though a country ratifies it, there is no accountability mechanism, which means they must go back, report, and say, this is what will happen. And if it doesn't happen, then the AU, for example, will implement a fine on the country. Those accountability mechanisms don't exist. And so if you're in a country where, for example, gender equality is not a priority, like mine, where the gender ministry was scrapped off, and the president very proudly said, What was the gender minister doing? We've saved money. And we know that's not the reality. Let's move on to the next slide. Emerging forms of violence. As I said, the digital age has introduced new forms of violence, cyberbullying, and online harassment. And the Maputo Protocol didn't cover this in 2003. The Maputo Protocol didn't cover, or I don't think people knew that we would be at an age in digital technology where you could type in your computer to produce a deep fake of somebody else, or you could type in, for example, on X on Twitter and say, Grok, please undress this person, which is a huge human rights violation. And so again, it's about review and ratification. Challenges in conflict settings were not also explicitly covered, especially in terms of the complexities of wars and genocides. At the moment, we're having extreme wars and extreme genocides within the African continent. And there's not necessarily a way that many countries or all of the countries in Africa can come together to support women in humanitarian settings, for example. We're very behind in terms of the legislation of how to protect and how to enhance the rights of girls, for example, who are on the move, who are living in refugee settings, or who are living in settings where they have to be continuously on the move. And so there was also a big challenge in terms of this. Also a lack of victim or survivor-centered approach. And while women's rights were promoted, that was the essence of the Maputo Protocol, they needed a larger support of comprehensive victim survivor related approaches, especially in terms of provisions for support services and legal aid. And my last point is in terms of addressing root causes and drivers. There was a recognized need for a stronger emphasis in addressing the deep-rooted patriarchal systems, cultural norms, and power imbalances that perpetuate violence against women and girls. And this word power imbalances is going to continue coming up in the slide presentation, as well as deep-rooted patriarchal systems. And up until now, so I can only imagine what the state was or what the situation was in 2003, the word patriarchy is there's a stigma around it. So even when you're negotiating instruments like this with member states and how these instruments are going to be implemented in countries, for example, there's still some iffiness around, is this really patriarchy? But we know it is. And so there needs to be more sensitization on patriarchy and how it feeds into the Maputo Protocol and how we can actively combat against this entire system that is intersecting with not only the health, the protections, the education of women. It's completely taking over the entire lives of women. It's a system deeply ingrained in society. And the only way that we can achieve gender equality is if we attack at the root cause, which is patriarchy. Next slide. Hi, Jordanis, how are you? Now, the AU Convention on Ending Violence, which was recently signed in 2025, which was a huge win for women and girls. It was a direct response to the existing gaps that existed in the Maputo Protocol and the persistent crisis of violence against women and girls across Africa. It aimed to provide a more enforceable, and comprehensive legal and policy framework. So essentially what the AUCE VOG did was it filled in the gaps that existed as a result of the time that the Maputo Protocol was signed into ratification, which was 2003, and it's 2025 now. So the issues against women and girls have consistently escalated. While at the time we thought things would get better for women and girls all over Africa, it's gotten worse. And so what this framework does essentially is it provides an updated framework for member states to use when they're dealing with the issues of women and girls in Africa. Next slide. Thanks. Now, its features are this. It's comprehensive. It addresses physical, sexual, psychological, and economic violence, both in public and private spaces, and critically in the cyberspace and conflict settings. And the cyberspace aspect is very important, and there was a lot of advocacy around the psychological aspect as well. We screamed at the top of our mouths that we wanted aspects of mental health to be implemented within the framework, because the topic of mental health has been consistently left behind. Psychological support and psychosocial support has consistently been left behind within spaces that deal with documents, important documents in the African member states. But it was important to include the psychological aspect, especially in terms of addressing the health issues that women and girls face. It also has binding obligations, which means it's legally binding, and it establishes clear and more detailed obligations for member states. So while with the Maputo Protocol, member states could say, nah, it's not binding, right? There's no fine. With this particular framework, it's legally binding. It holds a precedent. And so there is some sort of accountability if member states fail to implement. There's also a more victim or survivor-centered approach, and it emphasizes a more victim and survivor-centered approach and focuses on protection, support services, which is essentially what social services are, and access to justice for survivors, especially in terms of violence. And we also see this for important topics like digital violence, right? For cyberbullying, bullying within schools and how that transcends into the digital space. What happens if revenge porn is uploaded onto social media? The government takes up approach. They intersect that within different laws and different systems, and they take an approach that centers what is happening to the victim and how to protect the victim. So more finances are also circled there. Next slide. It also addresses the root causes, which I talked about previously. So it talks about promoting positive masculinity and the engagement of men and boys in prevention initiatives. And while I'm not an advocate, I know sometimes you're in member state negotiation rooms in terms of the implementation of these documents, and sometimes ministries are trying to implement these documents, and then they kind of translate anti-patriarchal systems as men are being left behind. But this is not what the framework does. The framework is saying that men are the perpetuators of violence against women and girls. We cannot ignore this. We must not take away accountability from the perpetrator. What we must do is we must recognize that there is a responsibility for men and boys to be a part of the conversation in achieving gender equality, and positive masculinity is one of them. And so this is why we see the rolling out of ambassadorships like a positive masculinity ambassador, or the engagement of campaigns around ensuring men are a part of the conversation in anti-GBV mechanisms. And the engagement of men and boys, in my opinion, is extremely important in the implementation of this framework. There's more accountability, and there's also context-specific measures, especially in terms of the customary and the legal systems in Africa. The law is the president. If there's no law, then there is no implementation. And so it's very important for us to recognize that if we do not have the law on our side, then we don't have much anyway. And so policy and law is a big part of this framework, and implementing it in different African countries, and emphasis on implementing it as well. Next slide. Now, what is the role of youth? What is the role of you? What is the role of youth in Africa? There's nothing I'm more passionate about the role of youth, because I think the role of youth is not just in the future, it's in the now. The role of youth is present, and the role of youth needs to increase and amplify in this modern day Africa. If there's one thing that I'm consistently saying, is that African youth, and specifically adolescents, and specifically adolescent girls, have been left behind in the global conversation for a very long time. I want to draw precedence on the fact that I know a lot of people say, oh, it's not a big deal that the conferences that deal with these issues are consistently in global north countries. So consistently in New York, consistently in South Korea, consistently in whatever part of a country in the global north that it is. But it's a big problem, because it means that African youth cannot participate. It means that when African youth need to be a part of conversations, they're told to go into the virtual arena. But we know that the virtual arena is not particularly the strongest suit of many African youth. There's a big digital divide that exists. And so while we can say social media campaigns are very important, which I do agree they're important in the digital age, we must still reach the most marginalized young people and adolescents in all their diversity, which includes young women and girls who are living in rural areas, young women and girls who live with disabilities, young women and girls who live in humanitarian and conflict settings. So what is the role of youth? Despite all of these different issues, systemic issues that young people face, there is still a way that we can actively work for the implementation of the Maputo Protocol and the frameworks. The first one, obviously, is on a personal level, because the personal is the political, but challenging norms and stereotypes is particularly important. And I think it's really important that we begin to digest that we cannot be comfortable with conversations that perpetuate gender stereotypes, particularly against women and girls. For example, one of the stereotypes that, oh, if a man beats you, he loves you. If a man shows you that he wants to take 20 wives and you have no legal precedent, you have no legal rights. These are examples of stereotypes. stereotypes. Oh, men will be men, boys will be boys. Girls are meant to cook, girls are meant to clean. The goal of a woman is that she must marry. These are daily stereotypes that we encounter in our daily lives. And it's our responsibility as women and girls who are informed, as young people who are informed, to actively combat these stereotypes. Digital activism is another one. And I would love if all of us could leave our LinkedIns or our Instagrams in the chat, and we can follow each other and we can update each other on the work that we're doing and support it as well. It's important that we leverage the power of social media and digital platforms, and creating digital posters, for example, which is something that I frequently do on my LinkedIn, is I create these posters where I have information about certain issues that are going on in the country, and I include facts that young people can use. I recently, for the FFD4, and while I wasn't disincluded from attending the conference in Seville in Spain, because who has funding for African activists? Who has funding for African girl activists? What we did was we created a toolkit, and this toolkit basically had all the information that we wanted youth in Seville to use. So a lot of young people don't understand what financing or transforming the financing global economic architecture is. But what this toolkit does is that it includes very simple language on what your demands can be for member states who will be at these very complex conferences. So instead of the very big jargon, which is in order for us to, for example, combat tax evasions or tax the rich, how do we do it? It's very simple language. And why we did this was because we understand the importance and the power of digital activism. So it's a free toolkit. It has a QR code. Everybody can use it. You scan it, you read the information, you see what's going on. And beyond just me creating toolkits, I also create these posts where I'm talking about the issue. So if there's an issue and you don't quite have the language or the packaging for it, you can refer to that post and you're thinking about, oh, yeah, there's this issue in my country, child marriage. How do I fight against it? But you don't have the packaging to present to your minister or to your member of parliament. What we'll do on the side of digital activism is we'll create this language for you. We'll create this one pager. So you can just present it to your minister while you're learning in the process, and you say, these are our demands and this is how you do it. Because I know sometimes we look at our leaders as perfect and all encompassing, and they have to know, oh, it's 2 minutes until this webinar needs to end. Give me a minute and I'll be done. Sometimes we feel like our ministers and our members of parliament and our funders should know this information, but you'll be surprised how many people in government don't understand that these are the solutions. And so we keep on pushing them to engage young people and to engage grassroots organizations in particular who are affected by these issues. But if we don't focus on educating and if we don't focus on solution-oriented strategies, then we won't go any further. Leadership in movements, young women in particular, are leading protests all over the world, all over Africa. We see it in Sudan, and we see it in Nairobi, and we see it in Senegal. And it's our responsibility to actively ensure that these young women's voices are being raised up, tagging politicians, making sure that young people's voices are being heard in your constituency, in the organizations that you're in. When you see that there's a space or an opportunity for a young person to speak, nominate. Next slide. Cool. Youth are indispensable, and I've already talked about this, so I don't think we need to really go on. Let's go to the next slide. Challenge norms, digital activism, lead your movements. Now, what's my conclusion? The Maputo Protocol laid essential groundwork for the AUC Vogue. It represents a vital evolution to address persistent and emerging challenges in Africa. Its active and innovative engagement of African youth is fundamental. It's fundamental. And it's truly important in terms of ending violence against women and girls on the continent. Now, if you were to ask me, say, Yande, what do you think we should do? I feel so lost. I feel like this is a lot of information. I'm not sure what to do. I'm open. I'll send this slide presentation to you, and I'll also include my LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn is at the end. Please go to the next slide so we can have the social media things. So that's my LinkedIn and my Instagram, just in case you'd like to contact me. But if I was to give you a message in terms of the Maputo Protocol, I would say, number one, member states have already negotiated this language, and they've already agreed that this is the work that they're going to do. And it's a powerful thing for a member state to agree, because it's not a simple process. It's civil servants who come from the ministry who then present it to to the minister, and the minister presents it to the president, and they sign and they ratify and they say, this is what this country is going to do. That AU Vogue is legally binding, which means that there will be some sort of accountability. So member states can't just sign and then go to the AU when it's time to report and then sleep during the meeting. They actually have to say what they've done and where they've lacked, especially if they want funding from these larger organizations, which again is more accountability. So if I was to tell you something, I would tell you, find the gaps that exist within your country in terms of the implementation of this protocol. It may be gaps in education. It may be gaps in women's leadership. And I encourage you to create movements and campaigns that deal with these specific issues and pitch them to larger organizations. TheALI is here. There are also different organizations within your countries, grassroots organizations, youth-led organizations, and start a movement. I strongly believe in this statement. You can turn moments into movements with discipline, hard work, consistency, but also connections. Connections are really important. Networks, fostering networks among young people, among the young people who are in these meetings. And so I'll leave you with this statement. I say it all the time in every single meeting that I've been in, and that's now should be yesterday. We must mobilize. Thank you.
My goodness. I think if there's one thing that I always say is that unconventional Black women, give me so much joy because we show up in ways, the world never expects, but, always needs. Um, Listening to Yande just reminded why I care so deeply about, such work. you know it's not just knowing about our rights. It's about claiming them and making sure other girls and women know they can do the same. Yande made it known plain. um if it's not written down, it won't get funded, and it's not funded, it won't get prioritized. That's the truth, period. But I feel like what moved me most is how she brought the Maputo Protocol to life. And this is not just as a document, but as a tool for real change. For that girl in a village who's never heard the word consent, for that woman told she can't own land, for every young African girl who's never been told to stay quiet. Uh, uh, my goodness. Thank you, Yande, for making the Maputo Protocol feel like, ours, for reminding us that knowledge isn't just, knowledge isn't just power. It is protection, it's possibility, and it's freedom. I really appreciate that. And I would love to connect with you. And I hope that the young women in here would connect with you as well. Um, so now this is where we open the floor. We've heard like the powerful truths tonight, but what's your take? What's burning in your spirit right now? What's happening in your community that this protocol could actually shift? Drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand, uh, please. Any questions? Any questions? I'm going to give you 2 seconds for questions. 2 seconds for questions. All right. I don't think there are any questions, but thank you so much. As we close, let me remind you this again and again. The Maputo Protocol is a legal tool, guys. And if we know how to use it, we can hold our governments accountable. we can protect our sisters and shift culture for real, for real. To our speakers, thank you for bringing the fire. um I'm really, in awe of, ooh, I can't even put it into words. Thank you for bringing the fire, and to everyone who tuned in, thank you for caring, for showing up, and for believing in the power of African women. If you don't mind, please switch on your cameras. Let's take a quick screenshot so we can remember this moment and, keep building from here. Switch on your cameras, please. You all look beautiful, by the way. Exilda, 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 hello.
Hello, I'm capturing. I think this is the last one
You're
in case
capturing.
this is
Okay.
ever. Yes.
All right.
We are done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Justine and Yande. We really appreciate you guys, and we hope that you guys have a magical weekend. We appreciate it, ladies. Thank you so much.